Well, hello and welcome to another in our series of Choice Words videos where we get to talk to the great and the good of UK fund selection, UK fund research, find out what makes them tick. I'm Julian Marr, I'm Editorial Director of Wealthwise Media, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Chris Metcalfe, Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer of iBoss and Kingswood. Hello, Chris.
Good morning.
Jump into our first question. What excites you about the current investment outlook? What gives you pause for thought?
The thing that excites me is the Donald Trump effect, at least at a fund level. And I think what Donald Trump has done is basically he's redealt the cards, and he has levelled the playing field to a degree that we haven't seen since the global financial crisis. I'm not sure that was a deliberate policy, but I think that is the outcome. And he has really created a lot of opportunities around the world. And that's what excites us. Diversification is definitely back. It's all thanks to Donald.
Flip side of that then what worries you? Is it
I think all through my career that the worries are always there, and I think it's probably the fact that right now it does feel a little bit like the pre-dot-com bust. Now, what I remember from that period, and I was around for that as well, was that things did go on a lot longer. The same narratives kept building and building, and the longer the narrative went on, the more people piled in, and FOMO became absolutely, the number one sort of driver. You can always say this time it's different, and there's plenty of people saying this time it's different. But within the dot-com boom, there was lots of internet plays, but it was very difficult to pick the winners. And I think it's exactly the same now. However, I think where people are obviously scared is that you don't want to be shorting these companies. If you're not fully invested in these companies, then you're going to be a long way short of benchmark. That is the fear. But I think at some point when we look back at when you've got the PE ratios of some of these companies now, I think people are going to look back and say, well, that was a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. What were we doing? We didn't stop them. Let's talk about individual investment then. What most draws you to an individual asset or fund, and what do you see as red flags?
I think on a fund manager level, what we're looking for in the underlying funds is managers who are flexible, and ideally flexible and humble, because we make lots of mistakes, they'll make lots of mistakes. And there's also periods of time where everything seems to be going right for you, and all of a sudden you think you've got maybe more skills than you've got. And I think it's in those periods where it's easy to start investing on a more concentrated basis, really backing your sort of winners, and that I think is a risk. So managers like Alex Wright at Fidelity, who's got a great track record of moving his portfolio around, and that's basically what you want. What we don't want to be doing is second guessing people like Alex, and that's where he gives us the opportunity to sort of stand back. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and then where do you stand on sort of alternatives? I mean, the question I always ask is, to what degree should professional investors and their clients be thinking beyond traditional investments, bonds, cash, equities, and towards what in particular in the iBoss Kingswood view?
Yeah, I think. We every time we have a new debate about this, or we debate with other people, it's always, I think the first thing you've got to do is clarify what are alternatives, because everybody seems to have a different view of what constitutes an alternative. It's the same with the themes, and what constitutes the theme. So first of all, you've got to get sort of rules of engagement down. I think the simplest answer for us is you don't need to go very far from traditional asset classes. I think as an industry we have been very good at basically selling people new things, which are basically old things in a disguise, and sometimes that doesn't go very well. And I think you don't need to go there. There are no new asset classes at the end of the day. So I think people need to keep things relatively simple. I think there's enough opportunity between the standard asset classes plus things like absolute return strategies, but the simple ones, the ones that we can actually understand. I think there's enough scope.
Good stuff. Sticking with professional investors, but sort of offering the benefit of your experience, what would be your top tip for other professional investors watching this?
I think one of the things that it's important to do, but it's quite hard to do, is get away from your own peer group sometimes, get away from the echo chambers. I do sit periodically with people doing the same job as myself, and you hear the same sort of opinions knocked around. And even where people are concerned about certain areas, so at the moment there's lots of debate about the US, is the US expensive, etc. People are loath to move away from those positions. And I think you do sometimes have to have the courage of your convictions. Having said that, if you're going to have the courage of your convictions, you need the support. You need the support of the management behind you, the board or whatever. And that's not always easy. So it's easy for me to say, get new opinions, have the courage of your convictions. But as I say, you've got to have that support. Otherwise you'll have a very uncomfortable life.
Personal question. What was your path into investment? If you hadn't taken that route, what do you think you'd be doing now?
Well, I wanted to be a PE teacher.
Right. How did that work?
Well, my dad basically convinced me that wasn't a very good idea. I thought it was a good idea because I could spend the rest of my working life doing things I wanted to do, running around fields basically, and getting paid for it. Well, what's not to like? My father persuaded me to go into financial services, and I've always been very grateful that he persuaded me to do that. I wasn't grateful at the time. It was a parent interfering as far as I was concerned, but it was probably the best piece of advice he ever gave me.
Very interesting. Then there you go. So if you'd be doing the PE thing, I wasn't expecting that answer. I don't know what I was expecting. Fair enough. That's the whole point of these interviews. If I knew what you were going to say, there'd be no point doing it. What was the biggest investment mistake you are prepared to admit to? And obviously adding a bit of instruction at the end of it. What did you learn from it?
I think, as I was alluding to before, if you have some success, or you're having a period of good performance, you can sometimes think you've got new skills. And about, I don't know, must be about 10 years ago, we learned that lesson the hard way. We started to second guess fund managers. So we started to look at some of the stocks they were picking and where they were actually in our industry. We thought we knew better than they did. And we relegated a couple of funds on that basis. And we were completely wrong. And after the second time, we thought we need to stop doing this. We pick the managers, we look at their figures, we look at how they do things, how they do through the cycle, etc. And you leave it there. So it was a difficult lesson, and I still look at those funds now. I say to the team and the new people coming into the team, remember where your skill set stops. Because if you start second guessing the stocks, you're going to clash with the underlying fund manager. They're the professionals, that's what they do. So leave it to them.
Very good. Every choice word interview's favourite question here. Outside of work, what's the strangest thing you've ever seen or done?
I discussed this with the team, because obviously, when you get to a certain age, there's quite a lot of stuff in the past, and I think getting thrown off stage by Kurt Cobain, I think that Leeds Polly in 1990 was probably the strangest thing.
Need a couple of follow-up questions. I mean, thrown off stage, presumably Kurt Cobain wasn't doing an investment presentation or some IFA event. So you were in a Nirvana concert?
A Nirvana concert, yes.
You thought you might join him?
Well, it was back in the day, and I was very fortunate that when I was going to a lot of concerts, there were very small venues.
Yeah.
There was no stadiums, unless you were sort of the Rolling Stones. You didn't play stadiums. So when you went to events like Nirvana concerts, you were in the mosh pit, and the whole aim was to get on stage and then swallow dive back into the crowd. So I did actually swap a couple of words with Kurt Cobain. He booted me off stage actually with his guitar, laughing, and and it just goes to show, I think within my team, we're all sort of half my age or even a third of my age, that even the old people did rock once. Might be a while ago, but we were cool once. Yeah,
you teen spirit, absolutely. Oh, good answer, like that. It almost makes me wonder what I was usually asked, in benefit hindsight, what advice you would have given yourself on the first day in this business. I don't know. Let Kurt Cobain aside. What would you have done?
I think I can still remember my first days, and what struck me was how many people who were at the other end of their careers were saying, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not starting now." And this was endless. And I thought, God, this is depressing. And I realised over time, because I was 17 when I came into industry, and I've realised over time there's a certain cohort of people are always saying that. And I was hearing it in 83, and I'm hearing it in 2025, people saying, oh, I wouldn't want to be starting again. I think, what you need to do is get away from those people, which is easier said than done sometimes. But surround yourself, and a lot of people say the same thing, but it's absolutely true. Surround yourself by people with a can-do attitude and people who don't say, no, that's not how it's done.
No, I like that. Saying to my daughter any other day, just you've got outward facing. Don't face inwards, just face outwards.
Absolutely.
Two more questions. One, back to business. How do you see, or what do you see as the best and worst case scenarios, the future of UK wealth management, UK wealth in the? Actually, that'd be the question.
Yeah, I think UK wealth management and the UK PLC, I think are both actually in reasonably good fettle, and it's very easy. I think every country is probably, with a notable exception probably America, at sort of talking ourselves down and concentrating on the negatives. Mm-hmm. But actually, the UK generally, I mean, I don't know how many budgets Rachel Reeves has got left, but it won't be forever. And this industry has proved itself remarkably resilient. And I think the things that we forget and the things that you can't model is entrepreneurship. And the UK has a fantastic history of entrepreneurship and reinventing itself and making itself still very sort of valid and real. And I think we're seeing it now in the tech space. Although we haven't got the behemoths of San Francisco, we've got we still do have a lot of tech startups. This is still a place where people want to come and start businesses. And whether it's in the UK wealth business or it's in the wider economy, we're still right up there for corporate law. Every time the tables are produced, we're right up there, but we never talk about it. So I'm very optimistic about both our industry and the UK generally.
I like that. I won't bring it down by asking for a worst case. I think that's very nice. Last question then. We call this choice words because what you do for a living, but now we're looking for some personal choices, tips, recommendations. One would be for a book, it doesn't have to be investment. The other one's a free hit. We have had words of wisdom, we've had podcasts, we've had golf courses, restaurants, churches. Over to you.
I think, well, if we start with the book, Bounce, the Matthew Syed book, I think that was a real eye-opener to me, and I know I've read a lot about the book and then the surrounding sort of narrative around the book, and he takes his the narrative comes from a lot of sources, but what it was clear that just how important practice is and then experience is, and this ability to embrace sort of failure, and they are the character traits that will get you through, as opposed to you tend to look at people and you think they're a genius, and there's lots of examples in the book, whether it's junior chess players or sports stars. I mean, and Beckham is probably one of these examples and best known. The amount of time that Beckham spent on the pitch practicing when everybody else had gone home. And he was compensating, some would say, for his lack of speed, but he worked that out pretty quickly. That if he worked really hard at this, he could be the best set piece player, and that's what he made himself. So I think in any industry, it's practice and hard work are as much as are the key factors for success.
Excellent. And a free hit?
It's another book, the history of the Holy Roman Empire, and what struck me when I read it, and it is it's a few holiday reads, to be fair. It wasn't just like a weekend job. There's a lot to read. But what struck me was just how arbitrary the boundaries between countries are, and how much luck there is, again, of how countries were sort of forged, and how many times over history friends became enemies, enemies became friends. And I think there are definite parallels with where we are today. When you see the interplay between Trump and Xi and Putin and Modi, it's a fascinating time, but it's not new. And I think when you read history, and I would say to anybody, always try and read history for context. Because obviously the world is getting ever more immediate, but you realise that things like the country boundaries and who you're friends with, not even the mountains live forever. Everything changes over time.
Excellent. No, thought-provoking choice word choices, thought-provoking answers to all my questions. For which, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. Do look out for further Choice Words videos as they are published.